Hare Krishna. Welcome back to our online reading retreat labs. So we are reading the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. In the last session, we have completed the third chapter of the first canto of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. So meanwhile, let me share my mind map. So what we have covered so far. So if you can see my mind map, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, the canto number 1 is creation. And in this age of now, we have completed the first 3 chapters. So this entire first canto, it is having total, if you see the entire mind map, we have total 19 chapters. And out of this, we have completed so far the initial 3 chapters. So today we are going to start the chapter number 4. That is the appearance of Sri Nārada. So in the first 3 chapters, we have seen questions by the sages in the first chapter, divinity and divine service in the second chapter, and Krishna is the source of all incarnations, that is in the third chapter. So today we are going to start with a very new chapter, that is the appearance of Sri Nārada. So as usual, I'm having my hard copy with me. And if you need this kind of a hard copy, I always recommend visit your nearest ISKCON center. And otherwise, you can also contact me and I will be getting you how to get this hard copy in English or any other regional languages if you want. So I have also both hard copy of my mother tongue, that is Odia. Also, I have the hard copy in Odia language as well. So let's get started. I'll be sharing the online Veda base as well with you. So this is how the Bhaktivedanta Veda base looks like, and we are reading Śrīmad Bhāgavatam first canto. So you can see here we have all the 12 cantos available online. So now we are going to start with the canto number 1, chapter number 4. That is the appearance of Sri Nārada. So this entire chapter, if we see, we have total 33 verses. Then let's get started with the first verse today. Canto number 1, chapter number 4, verse number 1, SB1.4.1. As usual, we'll be reading only the translation and the purport. In the sloka recitation lab, we'll be reading only the sloka, we'll be practicing slokas and their word meaning in that lab. So let's then get started with this verse translation. Vyasadeva says, on hearing Sutta Goswami speak, the Saru Saunaka Muni, who was the elderly learned leader of all the rishis engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows. Purport. In a meeting of learned men, when there are congratulations or addresses for the speaker, the qualifications of the congratulators would be as follows. He must be the leader of the house and an elderly man. He must be vastly learned also. The Saunaka Rishi had all these qualifications, and thus he stood up to congratulate Sri Sutta Goswami when he expressed his desire to present Śrīmad Bhāgavatam exactly as he heard it from Sukadeva Goswami, and also realized it personally. Personal realization doesn't mean that one should, out of vanity, attempt to show one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous acharya. He must have full confidence in the previous acharya, and at the same time, he must realize the subject matter so nicely that he can present the matter for the particular circumstances in a suitable manner. The original purpose of the text must be maintained. No obscure meaning that should be screwed out of it. Yet, it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called realization. The leader of the assembly, Saunaka, could estimate the value of the speaker, Sri Sutta Goswami, simply by his uttering Yathadhitam and Yathamati, and therefore he was very glad to congratulate him in ecstasy. No learned man would be willing to hear a person who doesn't represent the original acharya. So the speaker and the audience were bona fide in this meeting, where Bhagavatam was being recited for the second time. That should be the standard of recitation of Bhagavatam so that real purpose can be served without difficulty. Unless this situation is created, Bhagavatam recitation for extraneous purpose is useless labor, both for the speaker and for the audience. Moving to the next verse, SB 1.4.2. Translation. Saunaka said, O Sutta Goswami, you are the most fortunate, respected of all who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Sukadeva Goswami. Purport. Sutta Goswami is twice addressed herein by Saunaka Goswami out of great joy because he and the members of the assembly were eager to hear the text of Bhagavatam uttered by Sukadeva Goswami. They were not interested in hearing it from a bogus person who could interpret in his own way to suit his own purpose. Generally, the so-called Bhagavatam reciters are either professional readers or so-called learned impersonalists who cannot enter into the transcendental personal activities of the Supreme Person. Such impersonalists twist some meaning out of Bhagavatam to suit and support impersonalist view, and the professional readers at once go to the 10th canto to explain the most confidential part of the Lord's pastimes. Neither of these reciters are bona fide persons to recite Bhagavatam. Only one who is prepared to present Bhagavatam in the light of Sukadeva Goswami, and only those who are prepared to hear Sukadeva Goswami and his representative are bona fide participants in the transcendental discussion of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Moving to the next verse, SB 1.4.3. In what period and at what place was this fast begun, and why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? Purport. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is a special contribution of Srila Vyasadeva, there are so many inquiries by the learned Saunaka Muni. It was known to them that Srila Vyasadeva had already explained the text of the Vedas in various ways up to the Mahabharata for the understanding of less intelligent women, Sudras, and fallen members of the family of twice born men. Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental to all of them because it has nothing to do with anything mundane. So the inquiries are very intelligent and relevant. SB 1.4.4. Translation. His, Vyasadev's son, was a great devotee and an equivalence monist whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. Purport. Srila Sukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul, and thus he remained always alert, not to be trapped by the illusory energy. In the Bhagavad Gita, this alertness is very lucidly explained. The liberated soul and the conditioned soul have different engagements. The liberated soul is always engaged in the progressive path of spiritual attainment, which is something like a dream for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul cannot imagine the actual engagements of the liberated soul. While the conditioned soul thus dreams about spiritual engagements, the liberated soul is awake. Similarly, the engagement of a conditioned soul appears to be a dream for the liberated soul. A conditioned soul and liberated soul may apparently be on the same platform, but factually, they are differently engaged. And their attention is always alert, either in sense enjoyment or in self-realization. The conditioned soul is absorbed in matter, whereas the liberated soul is completely indifferent to matter. This indifference is explained as follows. Moving to the next verse, SB 1.4.5. Translation. While Sri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered up their bodies with cloth, although Sri Vyasadeva himself was not naked. But they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified, and when looking at them, made no distinction between male and female, but the sage made such distinctions. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 5.18, it is said that a learned sage looks equally on a learned and gentle Brahmana, a Chandala, dog eater, a dog, or a cow due to his spiritual vision. Srila Sukadeva Goswami attained that stage. Thus, he didn't see a male or a female. He saw all living entities in different dress. The ladies who were bathing could understand the mind of a man simply by studying his demeanor. Just as by looking at a child, one can understand how innocent he is. Sukadeva Goswami was a young boy, 16 years old, and therefore all the parts of body were developed. He was naked also, and so were the ladies. But because Sukadeva Goswami was transcendental to sexual relations, he appeared very innocent. The ladies, by their special qualification, could sense this at once, and therefore they were not very concerned about him. But when his father passed, the ladies quickly dressed. The ladies were exactly like his children or grandchildren. Yet they reacted to the presence of Vyasadeva according to the social custom because Srila Vyasadeva played the part of a householder. A householder has to distinguish between a male and female, otherwise, he cannot be a householder. One should therefore attempt to know the distinction between body and soul without any attachment for male and female. As long as such distinction is there, one should not try to become a sannyasi like Sukadeva Goswami. At least, theoretically, one must be convinced that a living entity is neither male nor female. The outward dress is made of matter by material nature to attract the opposite sex and thus keep one entangled in material existence. A liberated soul is above the perverted distinction. He doesn't distinguish between one living being and another. For him, they are all one and the same spirit. The perfection of this spiritual vision is a liberated stage, and Srila Sukadeva Goswami attained that stage. Srila Vyasadeva was also in the transcendental stage, but because he was in the householder's life, he didn't pretend to be a liberated soul as matter of a custom. Moving to the next verse, SB 1.4.6. Translation. How was he, Srila Sukadeva, and the son of Vyasa, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapur, now Delhi, after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded? The purport. The present city of Delhi was formerly known as Hastinapur because it was first established by King Hasti. Goswami Sukadeva, after leaving his paternal home, was roaming like a madman, and therefore it is very difficult for the citizens to recognize him in his exalted position. A sage is not therefore recognized by sight, but by hearing. One should approach a sadhu, great or a great sage, not to see but to hear him. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Sukadeva Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. He didn't satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. He was recognized when he spoke on the subject of Bhāgavatam, and he never attempted jugglery like a magician. Outwardly, he appeared to be a retarded, dumb madman, but in fact, he was the most elevated transcendental personality. Now, moving to the next verse, SB 1.4.7. Translation. How did it so happen that King Parikshit made this great sage, making it possible for his great transcendental essence of Vedas, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him? Purport. Śrīmad Bhagavatam is stated here as the essence of the Vedas. It is not an imaginary story as it sometimes considered by unauthorized men. It is also called Sukha Samhita, or the Vedic hymn spoken by Sri Sukadeva Goswami, the great liberated sage. Moving to the next verse, SB 1.4.8. Translation. He, Sukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to sanctify the residence. Purport. Sukadeva Goswami met Emperor Parikshit and explained the text of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. He was not accustomed to stay at any householder's residence for more than half an hour at the time of milking the cow, and he could just take alms from the fortunate householder. That was to sanctify the residence by his auspicious presence. Therefore, Sukadeva Goswami is an ideal preacher established in the transcendental position. From these activities, those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of God should learn that they have no business with householders, save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. Such asking for alms from the householders would be for the purpose of sanctifying his home. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the householder's worldly positions and thus becomes subservient subservient to worldly men. For one for one in the renounced order of life, this is much more dangerous than drinking poison and committing suicide. SB 1.4.9. It is said that Maharaj Parikshit is a great first class devotee of the Lord, and this that his birth and activities are all wonderful. Please tell us about him. Purport. The birth of Maharaj Parikshit is wonderful because in the womb of his mother he was protected by the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. His activities are also wonderful because he chastised Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow. To kill a cow means to end human civilization. He wanted to protect the cow from being killed by the great representative of sin. His death is also wonderful because he got previous notice of his death. His wonderful, which is wonderful for any mortal being, and thus he prepared himself for passing away by sitting down on the bank of the Ganges and hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord. During all the days he heard Bhagavatam, he didn't take food or drink, nor did he skip a moment. So everything about him is wonderful, and his activities are worth hearing attentively. The desire is expressed herein to hear about him in detail. Moving to the next verse, SB 1.4.10. Translation. He was a great emperor and possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he give up everything to sit down on a bank of the Ganges and fast until death? Purport. Maharaj Parikshit was the emperor of the world and all the seas and oceans, and he didn't have to take the trouble to acquire such a kingdom by his own effort. He inherited it from his grandfathers, Maharaj Yudhishthir, and brothers. Besides that, he was doing well in the administration and was worthy of the good names of his forefathers. Consequently, there was nothing undesirable in his opulence and administration. Then why should he give up all these favorable circumstances and sit down on the bank of the Ganges, fasting till death? This is astonishing, and therefore all were eager to know the cause. Moving to the next verse, SB 1.4.11. Translation. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed insuperable kingly opulences. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life? Purport. There was nothing undesirable in his life. He was a quite young man and could enjoy life with power and opulence. So there is no question of retiring from active life. There was no difficulty in collecting the state taxes because he was so powerful and chivalrous that even his enemies would, would come to him and bow down at his feet and surrender all wealth for their own benefit. Maharaj Parikshit was a pious king. He conquered his enemies, and therefore the kingdom was full of prosperity. There was enough milk, grains, and metals, and all the rivers and mountains were full of potency. So materially, everything was satisfactory. Therefore, there was no question of untimely giving up his kingdom and life. The sages were eager to hear about all this. Moving to the next verse, SB 1.4.12. Translation. Those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interest. So even though the Emperor Parikshit was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his moral body, which is shelter for others? Purport. Parikshit Maharaj was an ideal king and householder because he was a devotee of the personality of Godhead. A devotee of the Lord automatically has all good qualifications, and the emperor was a typical example of this. Personally, he had no attachment for all the worldly opulences in his possession, but since he was king for the all-around welfare of his citizens, he was always busy in the welfare work of the public. Not only for this life, but also for the next. He could not allow slaughterhouses or killing of cows. He was not a foolish and partial administrator who would arrange for the protection of one living being and allow another to be killed. Because he was a devotee of the Lord, he knew perfectly well how to conduct his administration for everyone's happiness, men, animals, plants, and all living creatures. He was not selfishly interested. Selfishness is either self centered or self extended. He was neither. His his interest was to please the supreme truth, the personality of Godhead. The king is the representative of the supreme Lord, and therefore the king's interest must be identical with that of the supreme Lord. The supreme Lord wants all living beings to be obedient to him and thereby become happy. Therefore, the king's interest is to guide all subjects back to kingdom of God. Hence, the activities of the citizens would be so coordinated that they can at the end go back home, back to Godhead. Under the administration of a representative king, the kingdom is full of opulence. At that time, human beings need not eat animals. There are ample food, grains, milk, fruit, and vegetables so that the human beings as well as the animals can eat sumptuously and to their heart's content. If all living beings are satisfied with food and shelter and obey the prescribed rules, there cannot be any disturbance between one living being and another. Emperor Parikshit was a worthy king, and therefore all were happy during his reign. Now we will stop here. The next session we will start with verse number 13. हरे कृष्णा श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय। हरे कृष्णा।